I was going through my late wife's desk when I found a specific instruction she left me for the day our children finally turned their backs on me. That discovery didn't just cut them out of the will, it sent me to start a new life on the other side of the world. This is a story about the high price of underestimating a parent. Before I show you exactly what she wrote, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and please like if you believe that loyalty is more important than a legacy. Growing up in Chicago meant learning how to read the wind. You had to know when a storm was coming long before the first drop of rain hit the pavement. Inside my 3-bedroom house on the south side with its small front porch and Martha's carefully tended garden, I'd built a fortress of safety that I thought my children understood. But standing there in my kitchen, I realized the storm was already inside the house. The room was painted a soft buttercream yellow, a color Martha had chosen 20 years ago because she said it caught the morning light better than the stark white I had wanted. Now that light was illuminating the greed in my son's eyes. Marcus placed a glossy folder on the table with a thud that sounded final. It looked expensive, the kind of leather portfolio that businessmen carry when they want to intimidate you. Vanessa was hovering by the refrigerator, her eyes darting around the room as if she were already mentally rearranging the furniture for the new owners. She wore a suit that cost more than my first car, but her smile was thin and fragile, held in place by hairspray and ambition. "We have it all figured out," Dad Marcus said, tapping the folder with a manicured finger. "We finished the basement in our house in Naperville. It is perfect for you. Private entrance, your own kitchenette, and we would be right upstairs if you fall or need anything. If you fall." That was the hook they used, the assumption of frailty. They looked at my 74-year-old hands and saw weakness. They did not see the hands that had loaded cargo trucks for 40 years, or the hands that had fixed the plumbing in this very house just last week. They assumed I carried debt like so many of our neighbors, or that Martha's medical bills from 2 years ago had broken me. What they did not know was that Martha Freeman had been 10 steps ahead of them for decades, and she had taught her husband how to play chess while they were still learning checkers. I looked at the plans they had spread out across the table. The basement apartment was rendered in cheerful pastels that could not disguise what it really was, a windowless cell with a hot plate and a toilet. They were not offering me a home, they were offering me storage. "Marcus," I said, keeping my voice level and calm, "you have been planning this for a while." "That is called being responsible," he countered, his chest puffing out slightly. "We cannot sit around until something happens to you. The market is hot right now, Dad. This neighborhood is gentrifying. We could get top dollar, pay off your debts, and put the rest into a trust for your care." My debts. He said it with such certainty. He assumed that because I lived simply, I must be struggling. He assumed that because I drove a 10-year-old sedan, I was broke. He did not know about the discipline it took to pay off this mortgage 15 years early. He did not know about the logistics company stock options I'd held onto since the 80s. Vanessa chimed in, her voice taking on that sugary tone people use when they are trying to sell you something you do not want. "James, honestly, it is a win-win for everyone. You get to be close to family, and we get peace of mind knowing you are safe. Plus, the equity from this house would really help stabilize the family finances. Think about your granddaughter. Think about Maya." She played the Maya card. That was a mistake. My granddaughter was the only pure thing in this equation, and hearing her name in Vanessa's mouth felt like a violation. I pulled out a chair and sat down, taking a slow sip of my coffee. I did not invite them to sit. Let them stand. Let them feel the awkward weight of their own ambition. "Who is the buyer?" I asked. Marcus glanced at Vanessa. "A developer. They want to tear it down and put up condos. That is why the offer is cash. They do not care about inspections. Tear it down. 40 years of memories. The mark on the door frame where we measured Maya's height. The rose bushes Martha had planted with her own hands. They wanted to bulldoze it all for a quick payout." I looked at my son, really looked at him. I saw the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept checking his phone. This wasn't about my safety. This was about his desperation. He was wearing a $3,000 suit, but he had the eyes of a man who was drowning. "I am not ready to sell," I said quietly. "Dad, be reasonable." Marcus snapped, his patience evaporating. "You are living in a 4-bedroom house alone. It is selfish. We're trying to help you. Help me, I repeated. Or help yourself. Vanessa stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. It felt cold. James, please. Marcus is under a lot of pressure at work. We all are. The market is unstable. We just want to consolidate our assets. Our assets. There it was. The slip of the tongue that revealed the truth. They did not see me as a person. They saw me as a portfolio item, an underperforming asset that needed to be liquidated to cover their own mistakes. Before I could respond, the sound of a car door slamming outside cut through the tension. I looked out the window and saw a beat-up Honda Civic pulling into the driveway behind Marcus's gleaming SUV. My daughter Kendra had arrived. She stepped out wearing her nurse's scrubs, looking like she had just finished a 12-hour shift. Her shoulders were slumped and she carried herself with the heavy, tired dignity of a single mother who had forgotten what it felt like to be rested. Great, Marcus muttered, checking his watch again. Here comes the bleeding heart. I watched Kendra walk up the path, pausing to touch one of the hydrangeas Martha had loved. Unlike her brother, she still saw the home, not just the real estate. But as she walked through the front door, I could see the conflict in her eyes. She was tired, she was broke, and she was outnumbered. Marcus and Vanessa had probably been working on her for weeks, wearing her down with logic and fear, until she agreed to this ambush. Hey, Daddy, she said softly, kissing my cheek. She smelled of hospital antiseptic and cheap coffee. Kendra, Marcus said, his voice sharp. We were just explaining the plan to Dad. Kendra looked at the glossy brochure on the table, then at me. She could not hold my gaze. Daddy, maybe you should listen to them. It is getting harder for you to manage everything alone, isn't it? Her voice lacked conviction. She was reciting a script she had been fed, but hearing it from her hurt more than hearing it from Marcus. Marcus was greedy, but Kendra was just desperate. And desperate people do dangerous things. Marcus did not let the silence hang. He jumped on Kendra's hesitation like a lawyer spotting a loophole. Exactly, Kendra, he said, pulling another document from his leather case. Look at these statistics, Dad. The actuarial tables for men your age living alone are terrifying. The likelihood of a fall, a stroke, or an accidental fire increases by 40% after age 70. We are not just talking about money here, we are talking about survival. Vanessa nodded enthusiastically, her blonde bob bouncing with the motion. It is actually negligent of us to let you stay here, James, she added, smoothing her skirt. If something happened to you, and we were 40 minutes away in Naperville, we would never forgive ourselves. And frankly, the equity trapped in these walls is irresponsible. It is dead money. It could be working for the family. There it was, the shift from safety to currency. I watched them discuss me as if I were a piece of antique furniture that had become too expensive to insure. Marcus turned his back to me, focusing entirely on Kendra. Think about the tuition for Maya, he said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper that carried easily across the kitchen island. Think about your own credit card debt, Kendra. If we sell this place, we can clear the family ledger. Dad does not need 4 bedrooms. He needs a safe space, and we need liquidity. It is the only logical solution. I sat there, my hands wrapped around my warm mug, and realized I had become invisible in my own home. They were carving up the carcass of my life before I was even dead. They had already spent the money in their heads. Marcus saw a bailout for his failing business ventures, and Vanessa saw a renovation budget. Kendra, poor, tired Kendra, saw a lifeline that would let her stop working double shifts. I'm right here, I said, my voice cutting through their huddle. They stopped and looked at me surprised, as if the furniture had suddenly spoken. I am not a statistic, I said, standing up slowly. My knees did not pop. My back did not ache. I kept myself strong because Martha had made me promise to outlive her worries. I am your father. I paid for this house with sweat and overtime. I paid for your colleges. I paid for your weddings. And now you stand in my kitchen and talk about my home as if it is nothing more than a line on a balance sheet. Dad, we are just Marcus started, but I held up a hand. You are done, I said. Take your spreadsheets. Take your blueprints for that basement cell and get out of my house. Marcus's face turned a shade of red I had not seen since he was a teenager caught stealing from my wallet. You were making a mistake, he hissed, snatching his leather portfolio off the table. You are being selfish and stubborn. When you get sick, and you will get sick, do not come crying to us. We are leaving, Vanessa said, grabbing her purse with a sharp intake of breath. Come on, Kendra. Kendra lingered for a moment, her eyes wet. Daddy, I just... Go, I told her gently. Go with your brother. She flinched as if I had slapped her, then turned and followed them out. I locked the door behind them. The click of the deadbolt sounded like a gunshot in the quiet house. I watched through the peephole as Marcus yelled something at Kendra in the driveway, gesturing wildly at the house before getting into his SUV and peeling away. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was mine. I stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to the refrigerator hum and the settling of the floorboards. They thought I was trapped. They thought I was an old man standing on the edge of a cliff waiting to be pushed. They had no idea I had a parachute. My feet carried me without thinking to the back of the house, to the room we'd always called Martha's sanctuary. The study smelled of lemon oil and the faint, lingering trace of her perfumed gardenias and rain. Her desk was exactly as she had left it 3 years ago. I dusted it weekly, but I never moved the papers. Her reading glasses were folded on top of a stack of National Geographics. Her favorite pen lay diagonally across a legal pad. I sat in her chair. The leather groaned familiarly, molding to my back. For the first time since the funeral, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of her absence. Martha had been the strategist. I was the logistics man, the one who executed the plan, but she was the one who saw the destination. I opened the bottom drawer on the left side of the desk. It was stiff, requiring a specific jiggle that only she and I knew. Inside were the usual layers of a life well lived. Old tax returns, appliance manuals, a box of greeting cards she bought on sale. But beneath the mundane stack, my fingers brushed against something textured and cool. I pulled it out. It was a thick folder blue cardstock, heavy in my hands. On the front, in Martha's impeccable cursive script, was a single yellow sticky note. Isaiah, it read, "When the wolves come, and they will come open this..." I stared at the note, my throat tightening. She had known. She had watched our children grow into adults, watched Marcus's hunger for status and Vanessa's cold calculation, and she had prepared for this exact Tuesday morning. She knew they would mistake my kindness for weakness. She knew they would try to harvest what we had built. I placed the folder on the desk and took a deep breath. The morning light slanted through the blinds, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I was not just an old man in a yellow kitchen anymore. I was Martha Freeman's husband, and I had orders to follow. I flipped open the cover of the blue folder, the architect's blueprint. Inside the folder, the first thing I saw was a stack of bank statements. They were not from our joint account at the big downtown bank. These were from a credit union 3 towns over, a place I had never visited. I picked up the top sheet. The balance was $24,000. I picked up the next one, $18,000. There were 4 accounts in total, each holding modest but significant sums. I leaned back in the leather chair, the numbers swimming before my eyes. I remembered the years of Martha clipping coupons, the way she would dye her own hair in the bathroom sink instead of going to a salon, the way she drove her sedan until the wheels practically fell off. The children used to roll their eyes at her frugality. "Mom is so cheap," Marcus would say. "Mom does not understand how to enjoy life," Vanessa would whisper. They were wrong. Martha understood exactly how to enjoy life, but she also understood the cost of freedom. While they were leasing luxury cars and buying houses they could not afford, she was quietly siphoning off the surplus, hiding it away dollar by dollar. She was not being cheap. She was building a war chest. I turned to the next section. It was a property deed, heavy and official, stamped with seals I did not recognize immediately. I adjusted my glasses. The document was in Portuguese, but the translation was clipped to the front. A 3-bedroom villa in the Algarve region of Portugal. Fully paid. The owner of record was Martha Freeman. I closed my eyes, a memory surfacing. 5 years ago, we'd taken a trip to Europe, our one big splurge. We had spent a week in Portugal.
I remembered Martha disappearing for a few afternoons, saying she wanted to look at local pottery. She hadn't been shopping for pottery. She had been buying an escape hatch. Beneath the deed was a life insurance policy.
I scanned the beneficiary line, expecting to see my name, or perhaps a split between the children, but there was only one name typed there: Maya Freeman. Not her parents. Just the girl. Martha had skipped a generation. She had looked at her own children, seen their hunger, and decided to protect the future instead of funding their present. Finally, I reached the envelope at the back. It was sealed with tape. On the front, she had written, "Read this last." I slit the envelope open with her letter opener. The paper was thin, the handwriting hurried but firm. "My dearest Isaiah," she wrote, "if you are reading this, I am gone and the children have made their move. I hoped I would be wrong. I prayed I would be wrong. But I watched them, Isaiah. I watched Marcus look at our house and calculate its square footage instead of its memories. I watched Vanessa ask about my jewelry while I was still wearing it. They love us, but they love their lifestyle more. And when people are drowning in their own expectations, they will grab onto anything that floats, even if they have to drown their parents to stay above water." I paused, wiping a tear that had escaped. Her voice was so clear in my head, pragmatic and loving and fierce. "The house in Portugal is ready," the letter continued. "There is a caretaker named Elena Silva. She owes me a favor, a big one. Call her. The number is below. Do not hesitate, Isaiah. Do not let guilt keep you in a place where you are viewed as a resource. Go to where you are viewed as a man." I sat there for a long time, the silence of the house wrapping around me. The shame I had felt earlier, the sting of Marcus's words, began to fade. In its place, a cold resolve settled in my chest. They thought they were dealing with a grieving widower who had lost his way. They didn't know they were up against a man who had been given a map. I picked up my phone. My hands were steady now.
I dialed the number Martha had written down, counting the rings as the international connection clicked and hissed. On the fourth ring, a woman answered. Her voice was wary, speaking in rapid Portuguese. I cleared my throat. "I'm calling for Elena Silva," I said. "I am Martha Freeman's husband." The line went silent. For a terrifying second, I thought I had the wrong number, or that too much time had passed. Then the woman's voice changed completely. It softened, becoming warm and thick with emotion. "Senor Freeman," she said, her English accented but clear. "We have been waiting for your call. Is it time?" I looked at the yellow walls of the kitchen, the empty space where my family had stood an hour ago demanding my surrender. I looked at the garden Martha had planted, which they wanted to bulldoze for condos. I looked at the plans for the basement cell they had designed for me. "Yes, Elena," I said, my voice firm. "It is time." "Then we will prepare the house," she said. "You are safe now, senor." I hung up the phone and looked at the blue folder. It was no longer just paper. It was a weapon. It was a shield. Martha had not just left me money in a house. She had left me permission. Permission to stop being the father who gives until he is empty and start being the architect of my own survival. I stood up and walked to the window. The Honda Civic was gone. The SUV was gone. The driveway was empty, but the storm was not over. It was just beginning, and for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly how to navigate it. I was not going to argue with them. I was not going to beg them to let me keep my home. I was going to do exactly what Martha had told me to do. I was going to win.
The next morning, the wind off Lake Michigan was sharp enough to cut glass. I drove my 10-year-old sedan into downtown Chicago, merging into the traffic that flowed like a steel river toward the skyscrapers. Marcus would have been ashamed to be seen in this car. He believed a vehicle defined the man. I knew that the man defined the vehicle, and this car was paid for reliable and owed nothing to anyone, just like its driver. Robert Stone's office was not in one of the flashy glass towers where they charge you for the view. It was in a sturdy brick building on LaSalle Street, the kind of place that whispered competence rather than shouting about its hourly rates. I had found his card stapled to the inside of Martha's blue folder. Robert was younger than I expected, maybe 50, with the sharp eyes of a man who had read too much fine print to be easily impressed. He shook my hand with a grip that was firm and honest.
Freeman, he said, gesturing to the chair opposite his heavy oak desk. Martha told me you would come eventually. She just hoped it would be later rather than sooner. She knew they would try it, I said, placing the folder on his desk. Robert nodded, his expression grim. She knew they were hungry, James. And she knew that hunger makes people justify terrible things. We spent the next hour dissecting the betrayal. I told him about the ambush in the kitchen in the basement apartment, plans the threats about my safety. When I mentioned the developer and the cash offer, Robert stopped writing and looked up. They cannot sell the house, he said flatly. Not legally. Your name is on the deed. They are acting like it is already done, I replied. Marcus mentioned a buyer. He said the offer expires in 48 hours. Robert picked up his phone and punched in a number. He spoke briefly to his paralegal, his voice low and dangerous. When he hung up, he looked at me with a smile that was not friendly. We are going to send out cease and desist letters immediately, he said, to every major real estate agency in the city, and specifically to the firm Marcus has been talking to. We will put them on notice that any attempt to list, show, or market your property constitutes tortious interference and fraud. If they so much as drive a potential buyer past your hedges, I will sue them into the Stone Age. That will stop the sale, I said, but it will not stop my children. No, Robert agreed. It will just make them desperate. And when they get desperate, they will try the next step. Conservatorship. The word hung in the air between us, ugly and clinical. It was the legal term for stripping a person of their rights, declaring them unfit to manage their own life, and handing the keys over to a guardian. It was a tool meant to protect the vulnerable, but in the hands of the greedy, it was a weapon. They threatened it, I said quietly. Marcus said I was a danger to myself. He cited statistics. Of course he did. Robert scoffed. That is the playbook. They paint a picture of decline. They will say you are confused, that you are forgetting to pay bills, that the house is falling into disrepair. I pulled out a second folder I had prepared the night before. Inside were my medical records from last month's physical showing perfect blood pressure and cognitive function. There were receipts for every utility bill paid early. There was a log of the maintenance work I had done on the house, dated and detailed. I do not forget to pay bills, I said. And I do not have a mortgage. Robert flipped through the pages, his eyebrows raising. This is excellent. This is armor. If they try to file a petition, we will not just get it dismissed. We will file a countersuit for abuse of process. We will show the judge their debts, their motive. We will prove that the only financial crisis in the Freeman family belongs to the children, not the father. He leaned back, tapping his pen against the desk. But you know James winning in court is loud. It is public. It destroys families permanently. Martha had a different idea. A way to end the war before the first shot is really fired. He reached into his own drawer and pulled out a document. It was thick, bound in blue paper. The irrevocable trust, he said. Martha drafted this 3 years ago. She never signed it because she wanted to give you the choice. She wanted you to see the truth for yourself first. I looked at the document. Explain it to me, I said. Robert opened the file. Right now, you own the house. You can sell it, gift it, or lose it. But if you sign this, the property transfers immediately into the Freeman Family Conservation Trust. You retain the right to live there for the rest of your life, but you no longer own the asset directly. It cannot be sold. It cannot be leveraged for a loan. It cannot be seized by creditors. And the beneficiary, I asked, knowing the answer, Maya Freeman, Robert said, but not until she turns 25. Until then, the property is locked. It is a fortress. If Marcus and Vanessa try to get guardianship over you, it won't matter. The guardian controls your assets, but the house won't be your asset anymore. It will belong to the trust. I imagined Marcus's face when he realized the equity he was counting on had vanished into thin air. I imagined Vanessa trying to explain to her creditors that the bailout was gone. It was a nuclear option. It would burn the bridge back to my children, but they had already burned the bridge, hadn't they? They had set fire to it the moment they walked into my kitchen with blueprints for a basement cell.
Where do I sign? I asked. Robert slid the papers across the mahogany desk. He handed me a heavy pen.
You understand what this means, James. Once you do this, there is no going back. You cannot sell the house to help them later, even if you wanted to. I do not want to help them stay weak, I said. I want to help them learn. I signed my name at the bottom of the page. The ink flowed smoothly, dark and permanent. With every stroke of the pen, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. I was not just protecting a building. I was protecting a legacy. I was ensuring that the home Martha and I built would skip the generation that wanted to consume it and go to the generation that might actually cherish it. Robert notarized the signature with a definitive stamp. It is done, he said. I will file this with the county recorder within the hour. By the time Marcus wakes up tomorrow, the house will be untouchable. I stood up, shaking his hand again. Thank you, Robert. He walked me to the door. James, one more thing. Martha told me that if you ever sign this, I should remind you of something. Okay? What is that? She said that a parent's job is not to make their children happy. It is to make them capable. And sometimes the only way to make them capable is to stop saving them from themselves. I walked out into the cold Chicago wind, but I did not feel the chill. I felt the heat of the battle to come. I got into my paid-off sedan and checked my watch. It was time to make the next move. Marcus and Vanessa were expecting a confused old man to be sitting at home worrying about their threats. Instead, they were about to find out that the old man had just closed the bank.
I was waiting for them. I knew Marcus well enough to know that patience was not in his vocabulary, especially when he smelled money. I had set the stage carefully. The kitchen table was cleared of everything except my phone and a single notepad. I had brewed a fresh pot of coffee, not for them, but for the clarity the aroma gave me. At 2 o'clock sharp, Marcus's SUV pulled into the driveway again. This time there was a third car, a sleek black sedan that looked like it belonged to a funeral director or a very expensive assassin. Marcus used his key to open the front door without knocking. It was a habit I had never corrected, a remnant of the days when this house was a sanctuary for him. Now the sound of his key in the lock felt like a violation. They marched into the kitchen in a phalanx. Marcus looked agitated, his tie, loosened sweat visible on his forehead despite the cold. Vanessa looked brittle, her eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses. And between them walked a man who carried himself with the practiced smoothness of a shark in a silk suit. Dad Marcus said, his voice loud and projecting as if he were speaking to someone hard of hearing. This is Arthur Sterling. He's our family attorney. He is here to help us facilitate the transition. Transition. That was the new word. Yesterday, it was a plan. Today, it was a transition. Mr. Sterling extended a hand that was manicured to perfection. Mr. Freeman, it is a pleasure to meet you. Marcus and Vanessa have told me so much about you. They are deeply concerned about your well-being, and I am here to ensure we find a solution that protects everyone's interests. I didn't take his hand. I kept my own hands wrapped around my coffee mug, warming my palms. I bet they are concerned, I said calmly. Sit down. Sterling blinked, surprised by the command, but he sat. Marcus and Vanessa took the chairs on either side of him, flanking him like bodyguards. Freeman Sterling began opening a slim briefcase. We need to have a frank conversation about your situation. Your children love you very much. They want to ensure you are safe and comfortable in your golden years. However, they have raised some valid concerns about your ability to manage a property of this size and the complex financial responsibilities that come with it. I looked at Marcus. What responsibilities am I failing to manage? I asked. Dad, stop it. Marcus snapped, slamming his hand on the table. You are living in a museum. You are alone. You are 74 years old. We know you are struggling. We know you are overwhelmed. We are trying to do this the nice way, but you are forcing our hand. Sterling held up a hand to silence him. What Marcus means, Mr. Freeman, is that if we cannot come to a voluntary agreement regarding the sale of the house and your relocation, the family may be forced to pursue legal guardianship. There it was, the threat wrapped in velvet. Guardianship, I repeated, tasting the word. You mean you want to declare me incompetent? We want to protect you, Sterling corrected smoothly. The court would appoint a conservator to manage your assets. Typically, that would be a family member. Marcus is willing to take on that burden. He would handle your finances, your housing, and your medical decisions. It is a standard procedure for elderly individuals who are in decline. In decline. I looked at Vanessa. She was inspecting her fingernails, refusing to meet my eyes. She knew this was a lie. She knew I still did the Sunday crossword and pen. She knew I balanced my checkbook down to the penny every month. But she needed the money, so she was willing to let them paint me as senile. And if I refuse, I asked, then we will file the petition tomorrow. Sterling said, his voice hardening just a fraction. We have statements from family members attesting to your confusion and memory loss. We have the incident with the stove.
What incident with the stove? I asked, genuinely curious. Vanessa finally looked up. Last Thanksgiving. James, you left the burner on after the gravy was done. We could have all died. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. I left the burner on low to keep the gravy warm, Vanessa. That is called cooking. But if that is your evidence, you are going to have a hard time in court. Marcus leaned forward, his face flushed. It is not just the stove, Dad. It is everything. You are hoarding this house while the family is drowning. That is irrational behavior. That is proof you are not thinking clearly. A rational father would want to help his children. I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out my phone. I set it gently on the table, screen up. The red recording dot was pulsing steadily. What is that? Sterling asked, his eyes narrowing. I am recording this conversation, I said. Just like I recorded the conversation yesterday morning. The room went dead silent. Marcus looked at the phone as if it were a bomb. That is illegal, Vanessa hissed. You cannot record us without permission. Actually, I said, looking at Sterling, in this state, the law requires only one party to consent to a recording. I am that party. I consent to recording myself in my own home. Sterling shifted in his chair, his smooth demeanor cracking. Mr. Freeman, I'm not sure what you think this accomplishes. I tapped the screen and scrolled back to yesterday's file. I pressed play. Marcus's voice, tinny but unmistakable, filled the kitchen. If we sell this place, we can clear the family ledger. Dad does not need 4 bedrooms. He needs a safe space, and we need liquidity. It is the only logical solution. I paused the recording. Liquidity, I said. Not safety. Not care. Liquidity. I looked at Sterling. You are an officer of the court, Mr. Sterling. You just sat there and told me you wanted to file for guardianship based on my mental decline. But here is my son admitting that the real goal is to clear his own debts. If you file that petition, I will play this recording for the judge. And then I will play the rest of it where they discuss how much my house is worth to them. Sterling closed his briefcase. The click was loud in the silent kitchen. He looked at Marcus with cold fury. You told me he was confused, Marcus. You told me he was unable to understand basic financial concepts. Marcus shouted, though his voice wavered. He is twisting everything, Mr. Sterling. I continued, my voice steady as a rock. I saw my doctor last week. I have a clean bill of health. I have a letter from him stating I am of sound mind. I have my financial records organized and paid up to date. If you file a frivolous petition for conservatorship, I will countersuit for abuse of process, and I will report you to the Bar Association for participating in a conspiracy to defraud a senior citizen. Sterling stood up. He smoothed his suit jacket, but the shark-like confidence was gone. He looked like a man who had realized he was swimming in water that was far too deep. Mr. Freeman, he said, nodding to me respectfully, I apologize for the intrusion. It appears I was misinformed about the nature of this case. Wait, Arthur. You cannot just leave. Vanessa cried out, grabbing his arm. We paid you a retainer. I will be refunding the unused portion, Sterling said, pulling his arm away. I cannot represent you in this matter. Good day, Mr. Freeman. He walked out of the kitchen without looking back. We heard the front door open and close. Marcus and Vanessa sat there stunned. The silence stretched out, filled only by the hum of the refrigerator and the ghost of their defeat. You set us up. Marcus whispered. You will... You set us up. I didn't set you up, I said. I just let you speak. Get out, I said, pointing to the door, and give me my key back. Marcus threw the key on the table. It skittered across the surface and hit my phone. He stood up, his face purple with rage. This is not over, Dad. You think you won? You have no idea what's coming. We will find a way. The only thing you will find, I said, is the door. They left, trailing insults and threats, but their words had no weight anymore. They were just noise. I watched them drive away, and then I picked up my phone. I saved the recording and named the file Evidence. I was alone again, but the house felt different. It felt fortified. I had won the battle, but I knew the war was shifting fronts. They would not attack me directly again. They were too cowardly for that. They would go for the soft targets. They would go for the one person I loved more than this house. They would try to turn Maya against me. I picked up the phone again and dialed my granddaughter's number. It was time to tell her the truth about her tuition before they could spin their own version of the story.
I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after Marcus and his lawyer fled. The silence in the house was heavy, but it was no longer peaceful. It was the quiet of a ceasefire that would not last. I knew my son. I knew that when he was cornered, he did not surrender. He changed targets. And I knew exactly who the next target would be. I looked at the framed photograph on the windowsill. It was Maya at her high school graduation, smiling with that wide, unguarded joy that always reminded me of Martha. She was wearing her cap and gown and standing between Kendra and Marcus. In the photo, my children looked like proud benefactors, their hands resting possessively on her shoulders. At the time, I thought it was affection. Now, I saw it for what it was. Ownership. I picked up my phone and dialed Maya's number. It was late afternoon and I knew she would be out of classes. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright and breathless, likely walking across campus. Hey, Grandpa, she said. I was just thinking about you. Mom texted and said you guys had some big family meeting today. Is everything okay? I closed my eyes. Kendra had already started spinning the narrative. Maya, I said, keeping my voice steady. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be absolutely honest with me. Okay, she said, slowing down. Her voice dropped to a walk. You sound serious. I am. The money for your tuition this semester, and the monthly stipend for your books and food. $12,000 in total for this year. Did you get it? There was a pause filled with the background noise of wind and distant student chatter. Yeah, Grandpa, I got it. It hit my account last week. Mom said they had to move some things around to make it happen, but it cleared. I gripped the phone tighter. And what exactly did your mother tell you about where that money came from? Maya hesitated. She said that she picked up extra shifts at the hospital. And she said Uncle Marcus chipped in a few thousand from his bonus. She told me it was a huge sacrifice for the family, so I needed to really focus on my grades and not waste a single penny. The anger that rose in my chest was hot and sharp, different from the cold resolve I had felt with Marcus. This was personal. This was theft of the spirit. Maya, I said, forcing myself to speak slowly. Your mother did not pick up extra shifts for that money. Marcus did not contribute a bonus. That money came from a direct transfer I made to your mother's account specifically for you because she told me you needed it handled that way for financial aid reasons. The silence on the other end of the line was profound. All the background noise seemed to fade away. What Maya whispered. I sent $12,000 to your mother last Tuesday, I continued. I have the bank confirmation number right here. I have been sending that same amount every semester for the last 2 years. Every book you bought, every meal plan payment, every credit hour. That was my pension, Maya. That was Martha's savings. No, Maya said, her voice trembling. No, Grandpa, that can't be right. Mom cries about how hard it is to pay for my school. She calls me every month and tells me how much debt they are in because of my education. She makes you feel guilty, I finished for her. Yes, she breathed. She makes me feel like I owe them my life. Grandpa, I wrote them thank you letters. I skipped coming home for Thanksgiving because Mom said the gas money would be too much after they paid my tuition. That broke me. The image of my granddaughter sitting alone in a dorm room, eating instant noodles and feeling grateful to the people who were robbing her was too much to bear. They lied to you, Maya, I said gently. They took my money, passed it to you, and claimed the credit so they could own your gratitude.
And now they're trying to use that debt, that fake debt, to control you. Why, she asked, and I could hear the tears in her voice. Why would they do that? Because debt is a leash. I said, as long as you think you owe them for your future, you will do what they say, you will study what they want, you will take the job they choose, you will be the successful daughter they can show off to their friends, the return on their investment. But if you know the truth, if you know that your education is already paid for by a grandmother who asked for nothing in return, then you are free. And they cannot handle you being free. I heard her sniffle, then a sharp intake of breath. That is why Mom is so weird about me talking to you about money. She always says, don't bother Grandpa. He is on a fixed income. He can't understand modern finances. They were protecting the lie, I said. Grandpa, Maya said, and her voice was different now. It was harder, older. Mom texted me 10 minutes ago. She said you were getting confused. She said you were starting to imagine things and that we needed to be careful with you. She said you might say hurtful things because of dementia. I laughed a bitter sound. Of course she did. That is their backup plan. If they cannot control my money, they have to discredit my mind. I am not confused, Maya, I said firmly. I am the clearest I have ever been, and I am going to prove it to you. How? By doing something that will show you exactly who they are, I said. I am going to make a move that will force them to show their true faces, and when I do, I need you to trust me. I need you to remember who actually paid for those books in your backpack. I trust you, Grandpa, she said. I don't trust them. Not anymore. Good, I said, because things are about to get very loud. And when the dust settles, I want you to be ready to walk away from the wreckage. We hung up, and I sat there as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the kitchen floor. They had weaponized my generosity. They had stolen my granddaughter's gratitude. They had tried to paint me as a senile old man to the one person whose opinion mattered to me. I looked at the clock. It was 5 p.m. The moving company I'd called earlier said they could have a truck ready by tomorrow morning. I had planned to just clear out the attic to donate the old boxes of junk my children had left behind years ago, but now the plan had evolved. I walked to the garage and flipped on the light. There, stacked against the wall, were the dusty monuments of my children's past. Marcus's high school football trophies, plastic gold flaking off the base. Vanessa's boxes of collectibles she had bought during a manic phase and then abandoned. Kendra's old textbooks and furniture she didn't have room for. For 20 years, I had been their free storage unit. I had kept their past safe so they didn't have to look at it, just like I had paid their bills so they didn't have to feel the weight of them. I pulled a marker from my workbench and a stack of index cards. I was done being the silent warehouse of their lives. If they wanted to manage property so badly, they could start with their own.
The diesel engine of the moving truck rumbled in the pre-dawn darkness, a guttural sound that felt like a war drum. I had hired a crew that usually handled evictions men who were used to moving fast and asking zero questions. I told the foreman, a man named Rodriguez with forearms the size of tree trunks, that we had a strict deadline. I wanted the truck parked in front of my son's house in Naperville at 7 o'clock on the dot. Why 7, Rodriguez had asked as he tossed a box labeled Marcus, High School Glory, onto the truck bed. Because that is when the neighborhood wakes up, I told him. And that is when my son drinks his kale smoothie by the front window. I drove my sedan, keeping a safe distance behind the truck as we navigated the morning traffic. We left the grid of the city and entered the manicured silence of the suburbs. Naperville was a place where the lawns were measured with rulers, and the silence was enforced by homeowners associations. It was a world of perfect surfaces, exactly the kind of place where a rusted white box truck looking for a parking spot was an act of aggression. We turned onto Marcus's Street at 6:58. The houses here were massive hulking structures of brick and stone that tried too hard to look like castles. Marcus's driveway was empty, his leased luxury SUV tucked away in the heated garage. The lawn was a carpet of violently green grass, undisturbed by a single weed. Rodriguez parked the truck directly across the driveway, blocking it partially. The air brakes hissed a sharp sound that cut through the suburban quiet like a knife. I parked 3 houses down, lowered my window, and waited. The back of the truck rolled up with a metallic clatter. The crew began to unload. They did not stack the boxes neatly on the porch. I had instructed them to place everything on the lawn, right in the center of that perfect green stage. First came the trophies, dozens of them. Plastic gold figurines of football players and baseball batters that Marcus had won 25 years ago. They glinted in the early morning sun, a shrine to a high school career that Marcus still talked about after 3 drinks. Next came the furniture. A plaid recliner from his college days that he had refused to throw away but refused to keep in his own house. A weight bench with rusted plates. Boxes upon boxes of Vanessa's abandoned hobbies. The easel from her painting phase. The pottery wheel from her ceramics phase. The boxes of china she had registered for, received, and immediately boxed up because it was not the right shade of cream. It was an exorcism of their clutter. For decades, I had been the curator of their indecision. I had heated and cooled these objects. I had walked around them in my garage. Now I was returning them to their rightful owners. The curtains in the house next door moved. Mrs. Gable, the neighborhood watch captain, was awake. I saw her silhouette against the window phone already in hand. Perfect. The subdivision jury was in session. At 7:10, the front door of Marcus's house flew open. My son stepped out onto the porch. He was wearing a silk bathrobe and monogrammed slippers, holding a mug of coffee. He looked at the truck. He looked at the mountain of boxes growing on his lawn like a cardboard fungus. He looked at Rodriguez, who was casually carrying a stuffed marlin that Marcus had caught in Florida 10 years ago. Marcus dropped his mug. It shattered on the porch, but the sound was lost under the noise of the movers. He ran down the steps, his robe flapping. "What are you doing?" he screamed, waving his arms. "Stop. You cannot put this here." Rodriguez ignored him, setting the marlin down on top of the plaid recliner. "We have a delivery order," he said, handing Marcus a clipboard. "Sign here." "Delivery from who?" Marcus shouted, his face turning a blotchy red. "From James Freeman," Rodriguez said. "He said you wanted your inheritance early." I saw Vanessa appear in the doorway. She was not wearing makeup, which for her was a state of emergency. She saw the neighbors peering out from behind their blinds. She saw the rusted weight bench sitting on her prize-winning fescue grass. She put her hands over her mouth and retreated into the shadows of the house, unable to face the social fallout. The crew finished in 20 minutes. It was a masterpiece of chaos. A lifetime of accumulated junk spread out for all of Naperville to see. It stripped away the illusion of their sleek, minimalist life and showed the messy hoarding reality underneath. Rodriguez taped a large, bright orange envelope to the front of the plaid recliner. Inside was a note I had typed on my vintage typewriter. "Marcus and Vanessa, you are so concerned with managing assets and property, I thought you should start with your own. These items have been living rent-free in my house for 20 years. Since you need liquidity and space, I am returning your inventory. Consider this the first transfer of assets. Manage it well, Dad." The truck rumbled to life and pulled away, leaving Marcus standing alone in his bathrobe amidst the wreckage of his past. He looked small. He looked ridiculous. The king of the castle, surrounded by rusty weights and plastic trophies. My phone rang before I even put the car in gear. "Dad," Marcus screamed, his voice cracking. "Are you insane?" Says the neighbors are watching. Mrs. Gable is taking photos. I took a slow sip of the coffee I had brought with me. "Good morning, Marcus." "I trust the delivery arrived safely." "You humiliated us," he yelled. "You dumped trash on our lawn." "It is not trash, Marcus," I said calmly. "It is your property. You told me yesterday that I needed to downsize. You told me I had too much clutter to be safe. I agreed with you. I'm just following your advice. I cleared out the safety hazards." "This is petty," he hissed. "This is spiteful." "No," I said. "This is parenting. You want to treat me like a child who needs his life managed, then I will treat you like an adult who needs to clean up his own mess. You have 2 hours to move that inside before the homeowners association finds you. I hear they're very strict about lawn ornaments." "Dad, please," he stammered, his anger turning to panic. "Vanessa is crying. You have to send the truck back. We do not have room for this." "Make room," I said. "Or sell it. You are the expert on liquidation, aren't you?" I hung up the phone and drove past his house slowly. Marcus was standing by the pile, looking frantically from the boxes to the neighbors' windows. He looked like a man trying to hold back a tide with a teaspoon. For the first time in years, I felt a genuine smile stretch across my face. It wasn't the polite smile of a father enduring an insult. It was the sharp, satisfied smile of a general who had just won a decisive flank. They wanted a war over property, fine. I had just delivered the first supply drop. But the real blow was yet to come. This was just the smokescreen. While they were scrambling to hide their old junk from the neighbors, while they were fighting over where to put the plaid recliner, I would be meeting Robert Stone to detonate the real bomb. I merged back onto the highway, headed toward the city. The sun was fully up now, burning off the morning mist. I turned on the radio. Some upbeat jazz filled the car. It sounded like victory. The jazz on the radio had faded by the time I pulled into my driveway, but the adrenaline was still humming in my veins. I did not have to wait long for the counterattack. At noon, the convoy arrived. Marcus drove his SUV like he was trying to run over an invisible enemy. Kendra followed close behind in her Honda. They stormed up the walk in a formation that was fueled by panic and humiliation. Marcus kicked the front door open. He did not use his key this time. He used his rage. "You think this is funny?" He screamed, his voice cracking with the strain. Mrs. Gable called the police, Dad. The police. I had to pay a junk hauling service $500 to clear the lawn before the homeowners association fined me into bankruptcy. Vanessa walked in behind him, her face streaked with tears that had ruined her makeup. "You are a cruel old man," she spat out. "We have tried to help you. We have tried to be patient. And this is how you repay us, by destroying our reputation in the neighborhood." I sat in the armchair by the window, the one Martha used to knit in. I did not stand up. I did not raise my voice. "I was just returning your property," I said calmly. "If you found it burdensome, imagine how I felt storing it for 20 years. Kendra stood in the doorway, looking between me and her brother. She looked sick. She looked like she knew something was broken that could not be fixed. "This ends today?" Marcus shouted, pulling a document from his jacket pocket. "I am filing the emergency petition for guardianship this afternoon. I don't care what your doctor says. I don't care about your recordings. You are erratic. You are vindictive. You are clearly suffering from dementia-induced aggression. We are taking the house, Dad. We are selling it to the developer tomorrow, and you are going into the basement whether you like it or not." I looked at the paper in his hand. It was trembling. "You cannot sell the house, Marcus," I said softly. "Watch me," he snarled. "I have power of attorney forms right here." "No," I said, leaning forward slightly. "I mean, you physically cannot sell the house, even if you get guardianship, even if you drag me to court. You cannot sell it because I do not own it anymore." The room went silent. The kind of silence that happens after a car crash before the screaming starts. "What did you do?" Vanessa whispered, her eyes widening. I picked up the heavy blue document from the side table. It still smelled like fresh toner and the notary's stamp. "I transferred the title this morning," I said. At 9 a.m., the deed was recorded with the Cook County Clerk. This house and the land it sits on now belong to the Freeman Family Conservation Trust. Trust? Marcus said, his face going pale. "What trust?" "An irrevocable trust," I explained, savoring the word irrevocable. "Martha set it up years ago. She never funded it because she hoped she wouldn't have to. But I funded it today. The terms are very specific. The property is designated as a historic family homestead. It cannot be subdivided. It cannot be developed. It cannot be sold for commercial use." I watched the realization hit Marcus like a physical blow. The developer, the cash offer, the condos, it was all gone. The land was worthless to a developer now because they couldn't bulldoze it. And who is the trustee? Marcus demanded, his voice a ghost of its former volume. "I am for now," I said. "And when I pass, or if I become incapacitated, the trusteeship passes to a professional fiduciary firm downtown. Not to you, not to Vanessa, not to Kendra." And the beneficiary, Vanessa asked, her voice shaking, "Who gets the house?" I looked at the photograph of Maya on the mantle. "Maya gets it," I said.
when she turns 25. Until then, it sits here, safe, protected, waiting for a generation that knows the difference between a home and an asset. No, Marcus gasped. You gave a $500,000 house to a teenager. I gave a home to my granddaughter. I corrected, and there is one more clause you should know about. It is called the contestability clause. Martha wrote it herself. It states that if any family member attempts to contest the trust or attempts to break the conservation easement or files for guardianship to try and overturn the transfer, they are permanently barred from the property. I looked at each of them. That means if you file that petition this afternoon, Marcus, you are not just losing the money. You are losing the right to ever step foot in this house again. You will never have Christmas dinner here. You will never show your children where you grew up. You will be a stranger at the gate. Vanessa collapsed onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. It is over, she sobbed. The loan, Marcus. The bridge loan. We needed that cash to cover the margin call. We are dead. We are financially dead. I watched them unravel.
The truth was out. It wasn't about my safety. It wasn't about the basement apartment. It was about a bridge loan. It was about their own gambling debts and lifestyle failures. They had leveraged their future on the assumption that I would die or roll over. Kendra spoke for the first time. Her voice was small. Daddy, did you know about the loan I suspected? I said. Greed is rarely about having too much. It is usually about fearing you will have nothing, but instead of asking me for help, you tried to steal from me. You tried to erase me. Marcus stared at the floor. The fight had drained out of him, leaving only a terrified middle-aged man in a suit that he couldn't afford. Why, he whispered. Why would you do this to us? Because you broke the contract, Marcus, I said. The unwritten one. Parents raise children to leave the nest, not to dismantle it for firewood. I am not your resource. I am your father. And since you could not respect the man, you will have to respect the law. I stood up. The conversation was over. I think you should leave, I said. I have a plane to catch. Plane? Kendra asked, looking up. Where are you going? I said. Heck, I am going to a place where the door is always open, but only to people who know how to knock. I walked past them, past the ruin of their schemes, and went into the bedroom to finish packing. I could hear them arguing in the living room, low, vicious whispers of blame. But it didn't matter anymore. They were arguing over a map of a territory they no longer controlled. I was already gone. 2 suitcases. That was what 40 years of life in Chicago boiled down to when you stripped away the furniture and the expectations. I stood in my bedroom with the mid-century dresser Martha had loved so much, and I realized I did not need any of it. I packed my shaving kit. I packed the wool sweaters I would not need in Portugal but could not bear to leave behind. I packed the photograph of Martha and me at Myrtle Beach in 1987, the one where the wind was whipping her hair across my face and we were laughing so hard we could barely stand. I closed the zippers. The sound was sharp and final. The house was quiet now. Marcus and Vanessa and Kendra were gone, retreating to their own homes to lick their wounds and panic about their debts. They would be calling lawyers, calling banks, trying to find a loophole in the trust. They would not find one. Martha had built that wall too high and too thick. I carried the bags to the front hallway. My taxi to O'Hare was scheduled for 4 o'clock. I had a one-way ticket to Faro with a connection in Newark. I checked my pocket for the passport I had renewed 6 months ago on a hunch. It was there, warm against my chest. I was reaching for my coat when a car pulled up to the curb. It was not a taxi. It was a rideshare service, the kind with the glowing sign in the window. The back door opened and a young woman stepped out. She dragged a heavy duffel bag onto the pavement. It was Maya. She wore jeans and a denim jacket, her hair pulled back in a messy bun that reminded me of her mother before life had hardened her. She looked at the house, then at the for sale sign Marcus had illegally planted in the yard, which I had knocked over, and then she looked at me standing in the doorway. She walked up the path, dragging the bag. The wheels clicked rhythmically against the pavement cracks. She did not look like a college student coming for a visit. She looked like a soldier reporting for duty.
Grandpa, she said, stopping at the bottom of the steps. You were leaving without saying goodbye. I was going to call you from the gate, I said. I didn't want to put you in the middle of this. I'm already in the middle of it, she said. I have been in the middle of it since I was 5 years old, and Mom told me to smile at you so you would pay for my dance lessons. She lugged the bag up the final step. I'm coming with you, she stated. I looked at the duffel bag. It was stuffed to bursting. Maya, you have classes. You have a semester to finish. You have a life here. I have a life here that is built on lies, she corrected. I went to the registrar this morning. I took a leave of absence. I told them I had a family emergency. And that is true. The emergency is that my family is toxic and I need to get out before I become just like them. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. I left this on the kitchen counter at home, she said.
It is a letter to Mom and Dad. I called it my Declaration of Independence. What does it say? I asked. It says that I know about the tuition, she said, her voice trembling slightly. It says that I know they stole your credit and my gratitude. It says that I will not be a prop in their stage play of a perfect family anymore. I told them that if they want a relationship with me, they have to build it on truth. And since they don't have any truth right now, I am going to find the person who does. She looked at me, her dark eyes fierce and wet. I told them I was going with the person who actually paid for my books, she said. I sat down on one of my suitcases. The weight of her decision was heavier than the trust document, heavier than the house. Maya, I said gently, this isn't a vacation. I am not going to Portugal to sit on a beach for 2 weeks. I am moving. I am leaving this country. I am leaving this life. I am going to a place where I don't speak the language and I don't know the customs. It is not a study abroad program. It is an exile. Good, she said, not blinking. I don't want a vacation. I want a reset. I want to learn how to be a Freeman the way Grandma was a Freeman. I want to learn how to build something that lasts, not just something that looks expensive. She sat down on the other suitcase facing me. Take me with you, Grandpa, she whispered. Please. Don't make me stay here with them. They will just try to use me to get to you. They will tell me to convince you to break the trust. They will make me the negotiator. I can't do it. I looked at her hands. They were clenched into fists, fighting for control. I saw Martha in the set of her jaw. I saw myself in the way she held her ground. She was right. If I left her behind, they would consume her. They would twist her guilt until she broke. Do you have your passport? I asked. She patted her back pocket. Always.
Grandma told me to keep it current. She said you never know when the walls might start closing in. Martha. Even from the grave, she was coordinating the logistics. I stood up and checked my watch. The taxi would be here in 10 minutes. I looked at the house one last time. The yellow paint, the porch swing, the garden where I'd buried 3 dogs and planted 1,000 bulbs. It was just a shell now. The soul of the family was standing right in front of me wearing a denim jacket and holding a duffel bag. Okay, I said. Okay, we will have to buy you a ticket at the counter, I said. It will cost a fortune. I have savings, she said quickly, from my summer job. Keep your savings, I said. Your grandmother left a travel fund. She labeled it, for when we dare. I think this counts as daring. A car horn honked from the street. The taxi was here. I grabbed the handle of my suitcase. Maya grabbed hers. We did not look back at the house.
We did not look at the neighbors peeking through their blinds. We walked down the path together, 2 generations of refugees fleeing a war we had finally refused to fight. Ready, I asked as I opened the taxi door. She looked at the open road ahead of us, gray and wide under the Chicago sky. Ready, she said. The flight across the Atlantic felt less like travel and more like an escape from a burning building. I watched the dark ocean pass beneath us, thinking about the distance growing between my granddaughter and the wolves who wanted to devour her future. Maya slept for most of the journey, her head resting on my shoulder, her face relaxed in a way I had not seen in years. In her sleep, Stripped of the guilt her parents had piled on her, she looked like the child she was supposed to be. When we landed in Faro, the light was different. It was not the harsh gray light of a Chicago winter. It was gold and thick, smelling of salt and dried earth. We walked through the terminal, two Americans with wrinkled clothes and heavy hearts looking for a sign of our new life. We found her standing near the exit. Elena Silva was a compact woman with skin the color of deep copper and eyes that had seen everything but chosen to remain kind. She held a handwritten sign that simply read, "Family Freeman." She did not shake my hand. She dropped her sign and pulled me into an embrace that knocked the wind out of me. "Senor Freeman," she whispered, smelling of rosemary and soap. "Welcome home." She turned to Maya and took the girl's face in her hands. "And this is the little one. Martha told me about you. She said you had the eyes of a seeker." Maya, who had been bracing herself for judgment or questions, melted under the woman's warmth. "Hi," she said softly. "I'm Maya." Elena led us to a battered station wagon that looked like it had carried everything from groceries to building supplies. As we drove out of the airport and into the hills, the landscape unfolded like a painting. White houses dotted the green slopes. Olive trees twisted toward the sun. The ocean glittered in the distance, a vast blue promise. Elena drove with the confidence of a local, navigating the winding roads while she spoke to me in the rearview mirror. "You must wonder why I am here," she said. "Why I keep the house. Why I answered the phone for a dead woman's husband. Martha told me you owed her a favor," I said. Elena laughed a rich sound. "A favor? Your wife was too modest. She saved my life, senor. 15 years ago, I was in Chicago. I was cleaning offices. My husband was working construction. We had problems with our papers. A lawyer took our money and did nothing. Immigration was coming to send us back to separate us from our children who were born there. I listened, watching Maya lean forward in the back seat. Martha found us, Elena continued. She was volunteering at the center. She saw my crying. She did not just offer a tissue. She hired a real lawyer, the best one. She paid the fees. She went to court with me. She stood up to the judge and said, "These people are the backbone of this city, and you will not remove them." I felt a lump form in my throat. I'd known Martha was generous, but I had never known the scale of her battles. "Because of her," Elena said, wiping a tear from her cheek, "my children grew up Americans. My son is an engineer in Seattle. My daughter is a nurse in Boston. When my husband died, I wanted to come back here to the land of my fathers. Martha bought the house and said, 'Elena, keep it warm for me. Keep it ready. One day James will need a place where the world cannot find him.' We turned down a narrow lane lined with stone walls. The car slowed. 'We are here,' Elena announced. The house sat on a rise overlooking the valley. It was not a palace. It was a simple, sturdy structure with white plaster walls that caught the sun and held it gently. The shutters were painted a deep, vibrant blue. A red tile roof sloped low over a wide terrace where a lemon tree grew in a terracotta pot. It was modest. It was quiet. And it was completely, undeniably paid for. We got out of the car. The silence of the place wrapped around us. There were no traffic noises, no sirens, no neighbors judging us from behind blinds. Just the sound of the wind in the olive trees and the distant conversation of the sea. Maya walked to the edge of the terrace. She ran her hand along the rough white wall. She looked at the lemon tree heavy with fruit. She looked at the view that stretched out for miles, unencumbered by fences or property lines. She turned to me, her eyes wide. "Grandpa," she said. "Yes, sweetheart." "My parents live in a house that cost $1 million, she said slowly. "They have 3 cars. They have a country club membership. But they are always screaming. They are always afraid." She looked back at the simple white house. "This place cost a fraction of that, didn't it?" "A fraction," I confirmed. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of lemon and sea salt. "This is what rich actually looks like," she whispered. "It isn't about the stuff. It is about the peace." I put my arm around her shoulders. Martha had known. She had known that you cannot explain freedom to someone who is in love with their chains.
You have to show them the sky. Come on, I said. Let's go inside. I think your grandmother left the light on for us. The interior of the house was cool and smelled of lavender and old wood. It was not filled with expensive things like Marcus's house in Naperville. There were no leather sectionals or oversized televisions. Instead, there were shelves filled with books in English and Portuguese. There were comfortable chairs, worn soft by years of use. There was a simple wooden table in the kitchen that looked like it was made for rolling out dough and having long conversations. Elena moved through the rooms, opening windows, letting the ocean breeze sweep out the stale air of our absence. She showed us the pantry she had stocked with bread and cheese and wine. She showed us the bedrooms, the linens crisp and white. When we settled in the living room, the sun was beginning to dip low, casting long golden shadows across the floor tiles. Elena reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with wax, a small touch of elegance that was pure Martha. "This is for you," Elena said, handing the envelope to Maya. "Your grandmother wrote it the last time she was here. She sat right there in that chair by the window, and she wrote for 2 hours. She told me to give it to you only when you were safe inside these walls." Maya took the envelope. Her hands were shaking slightly. She looked at me, seeking permission. "Read it," I said. "She wrote it for you." Maya broke the seal. The paper inside was thin and covered in Martha's looping handwriting. Maya sat in the window seat, the light catching her profile, and began to read aloud. Her voice was watery at first, but it grew stronger as she found the rhythm of her grandmother's words. "My darling Maya," she read, "if you are holding this letter, it means you were brave enough to follow your grandfather. It means you chose the unknown over the unhappy. I am so proud of you for that.
I know your parents have made you feel like love is something you have to earn with grades and gratitude and compliance. I know they have made you feel like a project to be managed instead of a person to be known." Maya paused, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She took a breath and continued. "I want you to know that real family is not the people who own you. Real family is the people who empower you. Your parents are stuck in a cycle of debt and appearance that they cannot see their way out of. But you have a chance to break that cycle. You have the heart of a builder, Maya. Do not let them turn you into a brick in their wall. Use this house. Use the peace here. Find out who you are when nobody is watching and nobody is keeping score. And remember that your grandfather and I did not save this money to control you. We saved it to free you." Maya lowered the paper. She looked out the window at the olive groves and the distant sea. The silence in the room was heavy, but it was a good kind of heavy. It was the weight of truth settling in. "She knew," Maya whispered. "She knew exactly how I felt. She knew they were suffocating me." Elena walked over and placed a hand on Maya's shoulder. "Your grandmother was a woman who saw everything," she said. "She told me once that she saw a fire in you that your parents were trying to put out with their expectations. She wanted to make sure you had a place where that fire could burn." Maya looked up at Elena. "She saved your family, didn't she? She used her knowledge and her resources to keep you from being deported. She fought the law, and she won." "Yes," Elena said. She was a warrior in a floral dress. Maya stood up. She walked to the center of the room, looking at the bookshelves, at the simple table, at the life we were beginning to inhabit. The uncertainty that had hung over her since we left Chicago seemed to evaporate. Her shoulders squared. Her chin lifted. "I know what I want to do," she said. Her voice was clear. I waited. "I am not going back to the university in the States," she said. "I am not going to study business administration just because Dad thinks it is practical." "What will you do?" I asked. "I'm going to enroll in the university in Lisbon," she said. I looked it up on the plane. They have one of the best programs in Europe for international law and human rights. She turned to Elena. "I want to do what Grandma did." She said, "I want to help families who are stuck in the system. I want to help immigrants who are being crushed by laws they don't understand. I want to be the person who stands up to the judge." I looked at my granddaughter, and I saw the transformation. She was no longer just the victim of her parents' greed. She was the heir to her grandmother's legacy.
Martha had not just left her a house, she had left her a blueprint. Elena smiled a wide, radiant expression. Sophia, my daughter, she knows the professors in Lisbon. She can help you. She would be honored to help the granddaughter of Martha Freeman. Then it is decided, I said. We are not just hiding out here. We are building a base. Maya walked over and hugged me, burying her face in my chest. Thank you, Grandpa, she mumbled into my sweater. Thank you for bringing me here. I didn't bring you, I said, smoothing her hair. You brought yourself. I just drove the getaway car. Outside, the sun finally slipped below the horizon, turning the sky a deep, bruising purple. But inside the White House with the blue shutters, the lights were on. We were safe. We were together. And for the first time in a long time, the future did not look like a spreadsheet of debts and obligations. It looked like an open door. The seasons changed in Portugal with a gentleness I wasn't used to. Winter faded into a spring that exploded with wildflowers on the hillsides, and our life fell into a rhythm that felt less like a routine and more like a heartbeat. Maya was the pulse of it. She attacked the language with the same ferocity she had applied to her law books. Every morning she sat at the kitchen table with Elena coffee steaming between them, practicing her vowels until they sounded like music instead of effort. By the third month she was bargaining with the fishmonger in the village square, laughing as he teased her about her American accent. By the fifth month she was dreaming in Portuguese. I watched her transformation with awe. The hunched, defensive posture she had carried in Chicago was gone. She walked with her head high, greeting neighbors by name, no longer afraid that someone was about to ask her for something she couldn't give.
One afternoon, while helping Elena organize the pantry, I found a stack of old receipts tucked into a cookbook. They were wire transfer records with dates going back 15 years. The beneficiaries were named Sophia and Miguel. The amounts were substantial, totaling thousands of dollars over the years. Elena saw me holding them. She stopped wiping the counter and wiped her hands on her apron instead. She didn't want you to know, Elena said softly. She said you were saving for your own family, for your own grandchild. She did not want you to worry that she was giving away your security to help mine. I looked at the dates again. These transfers matched the times Martha had claimed she was doing extra consulting work or taking on private clients. She hadn't been hoarding that money for herself. She had been investing it in the future of two children she barely knew. Sophia is the doctor in Lisbon who is helping Maya apply to the university. I said, the realization washing over me.
Yes, Elena nodded. And Miguel is a structural engineer in Porto. Your wife built the foundation for my family, senor. That is why we will always be the walls for yours. It was a circle of generosity that had been spinning for decades without me seeing it. Martha had planted seeds in this soil long before we arrived to eat the fruit. It made the house feel even more like a sanctuary. We weren't guests here. We were family by right of investment. But while our walls were holding strong, the walls back in Chicago were crumbling just as Martha had predicted. News travels even across an ocean. Robert Stone called me periodically with updates that were grim but necessary. The collapse of Marcus's house of cards had been spectacular. Without the equity from my home to secure that bridge loan, his financing for the new development deal had fallen through. The bank, less patient than a father, had called in his existing debts immediately.
Marcus and Vanessa are divorcing, Robert told me during a call in late April. It got ugly, James. Fast. Vanessa claimed he misled her about the family finances. She took the car and moved back in with her parents in Wisconsin. I sat on the terrace watching the sun glint off the ocean. I thought about the way Vanessa had looked at my kitchen table, calculating the price of my dignity. She had married a lifestyle, not a man. When the lifestyle evaporated, the marriage went with it. And Marcus, I asked? He is renting a condo in the city, Robert said. A small one. The Naperville house is on the market. Foreclosure pending. The neighbors, well, you can imagine the talk. Mrs. Gable apparently gave an interview to the local paper about the decline of the neighborhood values caused by the spectacle on the lawn. I felt a pang of sadness, sharp but fleeting. It was the grief of a parent watching a child touch a hot stove after being warned a dozen times.
I didn't want Marcus to be ruined. I just wanted him to be real. But he had built his reality on a foundation of sand, and the tide had finally come in. They lost their status. They lost their toys. They lost the applause of people who didn't actually care about them. It was a harsh lesson, stripped of all the cushioning I had provided for 40 years. Kendra is the only one holding on, Robert added. She picked up extra shifts. Real ones this time. She moved into a smaller apartment. She is paying her own bills. She asked for your address, James. I looked at Maya, who was sitting on the garden wall reading a thick textbook on European property law. She looked up and smiled a genuine, easy smile that reached her eyes. Not yet, I told Robert. She isn't ready. And neither are we. I hung up the phone. The silence of the Portuguese countryside rushed back in to fill the space where the Chicago chaos used to be. We were building something new here. Something sturdy.
And I wasn't going to open the gate until I was sure the people knocking knew the difference between a home and a bank vault. It was late August when the phone rang with the specific cadence of a call from the States. I checked the screen. It was Kendra. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the decline button, but then I looked at Maya. She was sitting across the terrace outlining a torts essay, and she gave me a small nod. She was ready if I was. I answered the phone. Daddy, Kendra said. Her voice sounded thin, stripped of the defensiveness that had defined her for so long. I am here, Kendra, I said. I wanted to tell you that I moved, she said. I am in a studio apartment near the hospital. It is small, it is loud, but I pay the rent with my own check. That is a good start, I said. I am seeing a therapist. She continued the words, rushing out a little faster now. Her name is Dr. Evans. She asked me to write down all the times I said yes to Marcus when I knew I should have said no. I filled 3 pages, Daddy. I let him convince me that your money was our safety net. I let him convince me that you owed us. I listened to the silence on the line, hearing the traffic of Chicago in the background. I am sorry, she whispered. Not for the money. I don't care about the money anymore. I am sorry that I looked at my father and saw an ATM instead of a parent. I am sorry I let Maya believe I was the hero of her story when I was actually the villain. It was the first honest thing she had said to me in a decade. Apologies are words, Kendra, I said gently. I appreciate them, but trust is built on action. I know, she said. I want to see you. I want to see Maya. I want to come to Portugal. I looked at the ocean, vast and indifferent to our small human dramas. You can come, I said, but not yet. When she asked, her voice cracking, when you have saved $12,000, I said. The line went quiet. 12,000, she repeated. The tuition money? Yes, I said. I do not want you to pay me back. I do not need it.
I want you to put $12,000 into a savings account for your own retirement. I want you to prove to yourself that you can build your own safety net. When you have done that, when you have erased the need to depend on your child the way you depended on me, then you can buy a ticket. She sniffled, but it wasn't the manipulative crying of the past. It was the sound of someone accepting a heavy load. It will take me a year, she said. Maybe longer. Then we will see you in a year, I said. We are not going anywhere. We hung up. I put the phone down on the table and looked at Maya. She had stopped studying and was watching me. Was that too hard, I asked. No, she said, closing her book. It was exactly right. She needs to climb her own mountain. We sat there as the afternoon light turned to the deep violet of evening. Elena brought out a tray of cheese and olives, joining us at the table. We were a strange little family.
An American grandfather, his expatriate granddaughter, and the Portuguese caretaker who had become our anchor. We were bound not by blood alone, but by the shared understanding that dignity is worth more than any inheritance. I looked at the house behind us. It was just a structure of stone and plaster. It would not last forever. But the lesson we had learned here, the peace we had built within these walls, that was something that could not be bulldozed. I raised my glass to Maya. To the architects, I said. She smiled, clinking her glass against mine. To the architects, she repeated. We drank to the life we had designed, the boundaries we had drawn, and the beautiful, difficult freedom of owning nothing but your own soul.
The most dangerous trap for a parent is confusing love with provision. We spend decades building a fortress to protect our children from the world, but sometimes we are just hiding them from the consequences that would make them strong. Isaiah Freeman taught us that true legacy is not a house or a trust fund. It is the courage to walk away from a table where respect is no longer being served. You cannot buy loyalty, and you cannot finance gratitude. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is close the wallet and open the door, forcing those you love to build their own shelter.
If you found satisfaction in seeing James reclaim his dignity, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice served.